You think you know A Christmas Carol. You think it is a story about kindness rewarded, about a cold man warmed by charity, about Christmas morning arriving just in time to save a hardened soul. That is the version passed down through films and schoolbooks, wrapped in snow and softened by repetition. But the story Charles Dickens actually wrote was never meant to comfort you. It was meant to trouble you. It was meant to linger in the room after the fire burned low, long after the carols stopped. Dickens did not write a Christmas story. He wrote a ghost story, and he said so himself. When the book first appeared in December of 1843, its title did not promise joy or redemption. It announced, without sentiment, A Christmas Carol in prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. That subtitle was printed plainly on the title page, not hidden, not implied. Dickens wanted his readers to understand exactly what they were holding. This was a story about the dead returning, about judgment delayed but not denied. That was not a strange choice for the time. It was expected. In Victorian England, Christmas was not yet the safe domestic holiday we imagine today. It was the darkest season of the year, marked by long nights and bitter cold, when illness spread easily and death felt close enough to touch. Families gathered not just to celebrate, but to endure the winter together. And when they gathered, they told stories, ghost stories. For centuries, Christmas had been associated with the supernatural. Shakespeare captured the tradition when he wrote that winter was the season for tales of spirits and goblins. By the 19th century, this was not folklore nostalgia, it was living custom. On Christmas Eve, households drew close to the fire while someone older, someone who remembered loss, began to speak of restless souls and unfinished lives. These were not playful inventions. They were reflections of a world where death arrived early and often. In the 1840s, the average life expectancy in England barely reached 40 years. That number hides a harsher truth. In many cities, nearly half of all children died before their 5th birthday. Tuberculosis, cholera, typhoid, and smallpox moved through crowded streets without warning. In working-class neighborhoods, a single cough could signal the beginning of mourning. Empty chairs were common. Fresh graves were familiar. Victorian households lived with death as a daily presence. When someone died, mirrors were covered so the soul would not become trapped in its reflection. Clocks were stopped at the exact moment of death. Marking the hour time itself seemed to pause. Black crepe hung on doors. Letters and calling cards were edged in black ink as public signals of grief. Mourning was not private. It was worn, displayed, enforced. Even memory became physical. Families commissioned photographs of the dead, especially children, posed as if only sleeping. For many parents, these images were the only likeness their child would ever have. Death was not hidden away. It was arranged, documented, and placed on the mantel. In one narrow London room, a child coughs through the night. The sound is dry at first, then wet, then quiet. By morning, the coughing has stopped. So has the child. The window is opened to let the soul escape. A sheet is drawn over a body so small it barely dents the mattress. The mother does not scream. She already buried another last winter. By evening, the room is rented again. This is not an exception. This is how cities learned to keep moving. For Dickens's readers, death was not a shock. It was furniture. And when ghosts came knocking at Christmas, they were not visitors from another world. They were reminders from the one just next door. This was the world Dickens knew. This was the audience he wrote for. When A Christmas Carol was released just days before Christmas, it sold out almost immediately. 6,000 copies vanished from bookshops before Christmas Eve, not because readers wanted reassurance, but because they wanted to be haunted in a way that felt meaningful. Publishers understood this appetite. Dickens understood it too. Christmas was the moment when people paused long enough to listen to uncomfortable truths. That is why the story begins not with celebration, but with certainty. Marley was dead, to begin with. Dickens does not allow the reader to ease into this fact. He repeats it, insists on it, reinforces it, until denial becomes impossible. Marley is not mostly dead. He is not symbolically dead. He is completely, unquestionably dead, and yet he returns. When Jacob Marley appears, dragging a chain forged from cash boxes, ledgers, and keys, Dickens is not indulging fantasy for its own sake. He is articulating a moral terror his readers already recognized. Marley is condemned not for violence, not for cruelty in the theatrical sense, but for indifference. He saw suffering and turned away. He accumulated wealth and did nothing with it. His punishment is not fire or torment. It is awareness without agency. He must witness misery forever, knowing he can no longer intervene. For Victorian readers, this was not abstract symbolism. It was theological consequence. The chain was not decoration. It was evidence. Link by link, choice by choice. Life had been spent, and now it could not be undone. Marley's warning is not gentle. No space of regret, he says, can make amends for one life's opportunity misused. This is not encouragement. It is a sentence being read aloud. Scrooge is not being offered redemption. He is being shown the future already forming around him. Modern adaptations often soften this moment. They turn Marley into comic relief, his suffering into spectacle, his warning into narrative device. Dickens intended none of that. Marley exists to strip away denial, to make Scrooge understand that time is not endless, and neither is mercy. When the ghost of Christmas past arrives, it does not come to comfort Scrooge with nostalgia. It comes to punish him with memory. The scenes it shows are not chosen for warmth, but for precision. A lonely child abandoned at school during the holidays, a brief moment of kindness that did not last, a love lost not through betrayal, but through slow corrosion by fear and ambition. Memory, in Dickens's hands, is not refuge, it is exposure. Victorian readers understood this deeply. They lived in a culture obsessed with memory, with preserving the past through ritual and object and mourning. Dickens turns that obsession inward. He forces memory to reveal what was lost and cannot be reclaimed. The pain is not softened by time, it is sharpened by it. By the time Scrooge begs the spirit to stop, pleading to be taken back, the haunting has only just begun. Marley showed him consequence, the past shows him cause, and the night is far from over. The ghost of Christmas Present is often remembered as the kindest spirit in the story, a figure of warmth and abundance who shows Scrooge the joy he has been missing. That memory is comforting, but it is incomplete. Dickens did not create this ghost to reassure. He created him to confront. When the spirit appears, he does not arrive quietly. He fills the room with unnatural excess. Food piles high on every surface. Fires roar brighter than they should. Greenery spills across the floor, as if nature itself has forced its way indoors. The sight is overwhelming, almost aggressive. This is not celebration, it is contrast. The spirit is showing Scrooge what abundance looks like in a world where most people will never experience it. They leave Scrooge's chambers at once. The ghost does not allow reflection. He carries Scrooge through the city, over streets where light flickers briefly in windows before vanishing into darkness. Laughter exists, but it is fragile. Warmth appears, then disappears. Dickens is careful here. Joy is real, but it is temporary, and it is unevenly distributed. When they arrive at the Cratchit home, modern retellings often soften what Dickens actually wrote. The Cratchits are not charmingly poor. They are precarious. The house is small. The meal is stretched thin. Every item on the table represents careful calculation. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is guaranteed. Mrs. Cratchit's pride is not decoration, it is armor. Bob Cratchit's cheer is not ignorance, it is resistance. They are holding dignity together with effort, not abundance. And in the middle of it all sits Tiny Tim. Dickens does not present Tim as a mascot for pity. He presents him as a child, fully aware of his own fragility. Tim understands that people look at him. He understands that his presence changes rooms. His kindness is not naive optimism. It is courage, shaped by vulnerability. When the spirit reveals that Tiny Tim will not survive unless something changes, Dickens does not linger on sentiment. Scrooge asks if the boy will live, and the ghost answers by throwing Scrooge's own words back at him. If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. This line is not exaggeration, it is policy. Dickens is quoting the language of the poor law, a system designed to punish poverty rather than relieve it. Workhouses were intentionally harsh so that desperation itself would serve as deterrent. Families were separated. Children were fed barely enough to survive. Suffering was not a flaw in the system. It was the system working as intended. Dickens had seen this firsthand. Earlier that same year, he visited ragged schools filled with children so malnourished they could not stand. He walked through slums where entire families slept in single rooms. He wrote A Christmas Carol, not as theory, but as response. The ghost of Christmas present does not argue. He indicts. Near the end of their journey, the spirit's tone changes. The laughter fades. The abundance recedes. And then Dickens reveals what nearly every adaptation quietly removes. The ghost opens his robe, and beneath it crouch two children. They are not beautiful. They are not innocent. They are described as yellow, meagre, ragged, wolfish. Their eyes are hollow, their bodies twisted by hunger and neglect. They cling to the spirit not as comfort, but as accusation. These are man's, the ghost declares. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. The warning that follows is not meant for Scrooge alone. It is aimed outward, directly at the reader. Beware them both, the spirit says, and all of their degree, but most of all, beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Dickens is not being poetic. He is being precise. Ignorance is not harmless. Want is not distant. They are the inevitable products of neglect, and they will return with violence if ignored. This is not prophecy, it is cause and effect. Dickens does something cruel here. He does not let the reader stand apart. Ignorance and want do not belong to Scrooge. They belong to the room, to anyone who has warmth and chooses not to look outward, to anyone who believes suffering is distant, deserved, or temporary. The ghost does not ask for charity. He demands recognition. Because once you have seen these children, once you know their names are written in hunger, looking away becomes a choice. And Dickens believed choices were the only things that truly haunted us. Almost every film adaptation removes this moment or reduces it to a fleeting image. It is too uncomfortable, too political, too direct. But in Dickens's story, this is the core warning. The supernatural horror is secondary. The real danger is social decay disguised as order. When Scrooge asks if nothing can be done to help them, the spirit answers again with Scrooge's own words. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? The cruelty is surgical. The ghost of Christmas present does not transform Scrooge through kindness. He dismantles him through exposure. Every defense collapses. Every excuse turns inward. By the time the spirit fades, Scrooge is not enlightened. He is shaken. And then the room grows cold. The final spirit arrives without announcement. There is no warmth, no abundance, no voice. The ghost of Christmas, yet to come, does not guide. He points. What he shows is not fire or demons. It is indifference. Scrooge sees men discussing a death with casual detachment, more interested in lunch than loss. He sees a corpse, stripped by those who profit from decay, bed curtains torn away, clothing stolen, even the shirt meant for burial removed and sold. There is laughter in the room, bargaining, no reverence, no grief. Dickens lingers here for a reason. This is what a life unlived looks like at the end. Not hatred, not outrage, forgetting. Only later does Scrooge realize the corpse is his own. For Victorian readers, this fear was intimate. To die unmourned meant erasure. It meant that one's existence had left no mark strong enough to endure even a single day beyond death. The horror is not punishment, it is meaninglessness. The vision shifts once more to the Cratchit home. The warmth is gone. The fire burns low. The small crutch rests beside an empty chair. Bob Cratchit returns from the graveyard, his voice barely holding together as he speaks of his child. "My little child," he says. "My little child." Dickens offers no comfort here. Loss remains loss. Redemption does not undo consequence. The future Scrooge is being shown is not dramatic. It is ordinary, and that is what makes it unbearable. By the time Scrooge begs the spirit for mercy, promising change, promising action, the judgment has already been delivered. The visions fade not because he asks, but because they have done their work. The ghosts have shown him something simple and terrifying. The future is built quietly, choice by what we ignore as much as by what we do. And now, the night turns toward its end. Scrooge awakens not into peace, but into urgency. The terror of the night does not evaporate with daylight. It lingers in his body, sharp and electric, as if the visions have branded him from the inside. He does not stretch or ease himself back into comfort. He throws open the curtains as if afraid time itself might close again if he hesitates. When he realizes he is still alive, his relief is not joy, it is reprieve. Dickens is careful here. Nothing has been undone. No suffering has been erased. The future Scrooge witnessed still exists as a possibility. The ghosts have not saved him. They have cornered him. This is why Scrooge's transformation feels frantic rather than serene. He laughs. He cries. He rushes through the streets as though every second now carries weight. His generosity is not graceful. It is urgent. He sends the turkey not as a symbolic gesture, but as immediate intervention. He gives because delay now feels dangerous. This detail is essential, and it is often misunderstood. Scrooge does not become good because he feels warm inside. He becomes good because he acts differently. Dickens is not interested in emotional redemption. He is interested in behavioral correction. Wealth that once accumulated now moves outward. Doors that once stayed shut now open. Distance collapses. Tiny Tim survives, not because kindness is magical, but because material conditions change. Dickens understood this better than most of his contemporaries. Charity without action was useless. Sympathy without structure meant nothing. The ghosts did not teach Scrooge to feel. They taught him to intervene. And this is where the story's meaning sharpens. Scrooge promises to honor Christmas all year, but not in spirit alone. He commits to involvement, to attention, to responsibility. He inserts himself into the lives of others, not as savior, but as participant. This is not a moral victory. It is a redistribution of power. Dickens does not claim that one transformed man fixes society. He claims something quieter and more unsettling. That change is always possible, that the future is never fixed until it arrives, that judgment waits, but it also watches. So why does the story feel so different now? Why has A Christmas Carol become synonymous with comfort instead of confrontation? The answer lies not in Dickens, but in what came after him. By the late 19th century, the story had become deeply embedded in British culture. But as it spread, it was reshaped. The subtitle quietly vanished from many editions. The words "ghost story" began to feel inconvenient. Publishers learned that the tale sold more easily when it reassured rather than accused. School editions softened the language. Illustrated versions leaned into snow and song. Chains became theatrical. Graves became symbolic. The story remained popular, but its teeth were slowly filed down. The 20th century completed the transformation. Early film adaptations removed the most disturbing scenes. Ignorance and want disappeared entirely. Marley's eternal punishment became brief spectacle. The stripped corpse was reduced to implication. The Cratchits became charming instead of precarious. The story still ended the same way, but the journey no longer wounded. Later versions followed the same path. The ghost of Christmas Present became a jovial host instead of a moral prosecutor. The future became frightening only for Scrooge, not for society. The ghosts shifted from judges to guides. Judgment softened into encouragement. Even the language changed. Where Dickens wrote of doom and consequence, adaptations spoke of hope and goodwill. Where Dickens exposed systems that produced suffering, retellings focused on individual meanness redeemed by cheer. The story became safe. This was not accidental. It was cultural self-protection. Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol as an intervention. He believed society was sleepwalking toward disaster while congratulating itself on comfort. He chose Christmas not because it was joyful, but because it was the one moment when people paused long enough to listen. The ghosts were never metaphors for feelings. They were instruments of confrontation. Dickens did not write A Christmas Carol to make people feel better. He wrote it to make them afraid enough to change. The ghosts were never meant to vanish with the snow. They were meant to linger, in every locked door, in every ignored plea, in every comfortable silence. Victorian readers understood this. They closed the book, knowing the haunting had not ended. It had only shifted. And if the story still unsettles us now, if its darkness feels inconvenient or excessive, that may be because the warning was never meant for the past. Some hauntings do not come rattling chains. They arrive as the things we train ourselves not to see. And Dickens knew that was the most dangerous ghost of all.